Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Tip of the Week. You may have noticed that I haven't been on the forums recently, and I apologize for that. The reason is that this week I'm actually signing in here from FMX in Germany, and this is an event that is primarily a 3D event, and so we're here focusing on how products like Storyboard 3D can be useful in different pipelines, even for 3D pipelines, for live action pipelines and that sort of thing. And in addition, of course, showing the Harmony capabilities for the 2D, 3D integration. So because of that reason, I haven't really been able to log on too much onto the forums this week. I will be back on again next week, so you can look out for me there. And for those of you who did have a chance to meet me here at FMX, it was a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to introduce the software to you in more detail. And now, because of the difficulty in my scheduling here, I want to do a really quick tip of the week this week, so I hope you'll forgive me. The tip I want to do this week is about multiple output formats. So this is something that can only be done from Animate Pro or Harmony. If you're working in Animate, the only way that you have of exporting your file is through File, Export, and then the movie or image files options. And when you do that, it takes the resolution from the resolution of your scene. So if you go to Scene and then Scene Settings, whatever the current resolution that you have selected is the resolution that it will use for the export. Now, when you're working with Harmony or Animate Pro, there's a second ability here. When you export, if you do that same option, the File, Export Movie, it will do the same thing. It will export a movie file from a display node, from this display node here, using the scene settings, so using the currently selected resolution. However, if you do want to do something like using the write modules to export your film, and I highly recommend this because of a variety of reasons, but one of them is that you can actually configure these write nodes, then you can actually output multiple things at one time. So for example, if I want to, I can output a series of images. If I want to output TGA files or PSD, PNG files. PNG files are often a good one to go with, but if I want to export those, and by the way, of course, if you have a 4 at the end of that, that indicates 4 channels. So if you want to export with transparency, the 4 channels are RGBA, so red, green, blue, and alpha. So PNG4, TGA4, PSD4, these are the formats that are going to allow you to export with transparency. So sometimes you might want to have multiple write nodes. You might want to have one write node that you use to export out, let's say, an image sequence, and you might also want to have a second write module that will write out a series, like an actual movie. So now you can select the movie option from here. And in newer versions of Harmony, you can actually, there's a checkbox here instead of a radio button. So in newer versions of Harmony, you can check both the image sequence and the movie options at the same time. But with Animate Pro and older versions of Harmony, then you have only the ability to select one or the other. So if I want to do both the image sequence and the movie, I still can. It's just that I've got to use 2 write modules. And now in here I can customize my movie options. And I won't go into these options in too much detail there. I just want to point out, though, if you're going to do a QuickTime export and you do want to have an alpha channel showing, then you need to select Millions of Color Plus, and that will export a movie with alpha channel. And when it comes to common codecs, the animation codec is pretty much uncompressed. So that's going to create a really large file. One of the other really common formats to use is the H.264. So if you're looking for a format to try out, that's a good one to try out. And the list here that you'll see is populated based off of the QuickTime that you have installed on your machine. So since I have just the regular basic QuickTime, I see the basic options here. But if you have something like Final Cut installed on your machine, you will see an additional set of QuickTime options available to you. Now, when we're talking about multiple output formats, though, we're not just talking about multiple write nodes from the same resolution. This is still all taking that scene settings resolution into account when I'm exporting. But sometimes you actually want to to create an SD or a smaller definition version of this scene. Maybe it used to be that you would do this when you had to have a version for NTSC for television and an HD version for television. These days for TV, it's all HD, so that's not the reason. But you might want to export something to go to the web. So if you want to have a version to go to the web, you might want to actually scale down that version here. And if you go into the filter tab here, then you will be able to, actually let's just go into all modules since I don't exactly remember where it is. Okay, so from in here you'll have the scale output option. And when you take the scale output option, it's taking the final image and then scaling it. So you always want to scale from a larger image to a smaller image. You never want to scale from a small one up to a large one. If you scale up, you might get some pixelation or blurriness, but it's much better to scale down. Now at this point, you can actually scale it down to a new resolution. And so usually what people will do is they'll scale down at the same aspect ratio, so they'll scale down to the HD version but in half. Like sometimes you want to have one version that's going to be your full 1080p, and you might want to have a smaller scaled version that's going to be 720p. And by the way, you'll see here if you uncheck the custom resolution option, you can actually choose a resolution from the menu there. So if I've saved an HD 720 option in my resolution files, I can just choose that directly there. And if you need to, you can also attach after the scale, you can attach this crop module. So if you're working in HD and you want to go to an aspect ratio that's an SD ratio, for example from HD to NTSC, you would add a scale plus a crop. Now these days it's less common to do that because it's less common to actually output an SD version. You no longer see people that are actually cutting the sides off the image. That used to be more or less popular. But now, even if you're going to go to the web, you'll see that the web will still have an aspect ratio that will be in that widescreen format because people are used to it, they prefer it. If you go to YouTube these days, everything is still in HD on YouTube. So you will probably these days just do a scale. And then after you get to the bottom of that scale, now I can add a new write module and attach this and select the properties that I want for this one. And just keep in mind, by the way, when you are working with multiple write modules, you want to either point to different folders or create different file names. Because if I have two different write modules and they look exactly the same, they're going to kind of overwrite each other. So I might want to have this be final HD, and then my other one could be final, SD, or maybe I'll call it 720, or you can call it whatever you want. So and the other thing is you can actually choose a folder. By default it points to the frames folder, which is in the project that you're working on. You can also point to an external folder. If you click on choose, it will allow you to point anywhere, so you can point it anywhere in your file system. And if you ever choose a folder and maybe you've opened a project from somebody else's computer and this folder doesn't exist on your computer, then you can always just hit the default button and it's going to take it right back to that frames directory. So that's pretty much all you need to know in terms of outputting multiple formats. You want to make sure that you use multiple write nodes. You can also, by the way, export write modules in the middle somewhere. Like if I have 5 different drawing layers, I can export each drawing layer with its own write node if I want to extract the information of that drawing layer from the whole scene. So hopefully that gives you an idea of why it's really neat what we can do with this compositing in Animate Pro and Harmony. And of course, because we don't have the compositing option in Animate, we don't have the ability to do the same thing in Animate that we do here. So that's it for this week. I hope you guys have a great weekend. It's Mother's Day in some places around the world, so happy Mother's Day to those of you that are celebrating that. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.